tool review on the Ryobi Airstrike what is this? The P360 Airstrike stapler. Very similar to their Airstrike 18 ga nailer, which I have right here. We've been using this. I've had one of these for most of a year now, and it's a fairly decent tool. One of the things I really like about it is it doesn't jam very much. And of their stapler nailer type technology, I find it to be every bit as good as a DeWalt. The DeWalt that I had never jammed at all. This one every once in a while, but it's also not all that cheap compared to the DeWalt. The DeWalt was around 200 bucks, bare tool. This around 130. For a few bucks more, you can get the stapler. The stapler is a far better tool, maybe a little bit less versatile than the nailer, but if you're actually trying to do anything structural with thin sheet material, the stapler is really great for that. Loading, as you can see, compared to the nail gun, the tool portion is almost the same. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some a lot of parts compatibility between the two. And there's built-in lights, built-in adjustments for the depth. Right here, this little thumb wheel is going to be our depth adjustment. Our power adjustment is right here. We can spin that to be a little bit higher powered, lower powered. Generally speaking, the staples are more rigid, so they're more capable of getting into harder wood. And where you really use these types of things is when you're trying to attach a thinner material to wood, like this stuff's semi-flexible, and we're gonna, we staple that in. Now we can staple that in, and the staples will hold it just fine. But if we're trying to waterproof something or really seal it, you would staple it and then have glue in there, and the staples really pull it together. It's as good as using screws in that regard, as far as really pulling things together and making it to where it'll squeeze the glue through. This is all stapled, no screws at all used on this. I used a framing nailer to go through the thicker stuff, and of course a lot of glue, so that this is going to have a lot of structural integrity. Staples alone can give you decent structural integrity, but when you're also trying to make something waterproof and roadworthy, you want to add glue too. For this wall panel work, the staples are really good. And then for this corrugated plastic type material, the staples have just proven perfect for that. Really perfect. You got to watch the length on these things. There were sufficient power to kind of splinter out a little bit on the wood here. I'll be using filler. That's going to be just fine. Loading the stapler is a little bit different from the nailer, and it's a little bit different from other staplers of its type, because, and you'll think it's about the same because the mechanism, the locking and unlocking, very similar. For example, on this one, we pull this down, we load the nails in there, and we close it. A little tricky. They can pop out when you're doing it. But you got to realize this whole feed mechanism is nails only. Okay, that's going to do brad nails only, 18 gauge, common industrial brad nails only. On this one, you go to lower this thing, and it's like, okay, only part of that came apart, right? We're doing this, and it's like, okay, well, where does it go, right? And so I thought, well, maybe we pull this thing all the way out and we stick them up underneath or something, and it wasn't coming out. Well, that's actually fixed in place, so there's no part that actually comes off of this when you activate that little mechanism. What you have to do is you feed it from the front. So you can set it like this. We set our staples in a tray, and the thing to look out for is that if you had like a little row of staples left, if they flip down sideways, that's what's going to jam you up. So you want to make sure the tray is clear and all the staples are the solid back to the rear, the pointy side to the front. The other thing I've noticed is that the mechanism is relatively tolerant. Even though these are all called 18 gauge staples, some of them are actually a little bit thicker and heavier than others. And that staple head is really enough to grab onto a lot of this material, but you don't want to punch it in so much it penetrates it and then you're not grabbing enough material to pull it in. But it's got plenty of power to put these into pine, which is what we're working for. I don't have the power turned up all the way. I've not tried it with hardwood, but I'm guessing we're going to be just fine if we do. And then, so you stick those in with the open part facing what will be forward, and we close it. Now, if you're trying to put too many in there, like let's say you haven't run that last one down before you're putting a full one in, it's not going to want to close. It's one of the things I noticed about that. Of course, we've got our depth adjustment here. We've got our power adjustment right here. One of the things I'll do is if you leave the power adjustment a little light and you're going to finish these off with a hammer, it's not the end of the world, but you're going to want to work with that depending on your job. Because this is electric and not air, once you set your power adjustments, it's going to be pretty consistent. It's not like it changes because you're running low on air in your system. It also, because this is something you're really going to use with the lithium batteries, you know, the lithium batteries are either on or off. But if you use that larger, like the P108 batteries, you're going to get a little more power out of the unit. So of course that's going to affect your where you want your power setting on that. It's got rubber pads around on the composite molding. So you know, if it bounces around on, let's say, finished wood like this floor, it's not the end of the world. But of course you don't want to be throwing this around. But it is something I would consider to be job site tough. Again, I'd recommend using the larger capacity batteries on this, but you really don't need to. And if you're just stapling thinner materials, let's say onto pine, it may be, you may just want to go ahead and use this with a lighter weight battery. There's a little bit of a grip safety here that mainly activates your light. So, you know, you've got to work light if you're working with this inside cabinets or something like that. This is your situation for that. It's not as necessary with regards to using that, but if you wondered why, you know, sometimes the light works, sometimes it doesn't, it's actually because there's a second trigger right here. It's you basically have to push in a little plunger here to get action, and that's it. You know, I mean, this will punch through this stuff just fine. And it's really good for securing panel flat material to, you know, wood. Whether you're securing plastic or thin panel wood, I've been able to go up to this, you know, it's like a little bit thicker than 1/4 inch plywood. Great for that. Far better on thin plywood than using screws. And when you're doing thin plywood with nails, it's not even close. The staple is a far better type of fastener to use. Also very, very fast compared to using screws. There's nothing wrong with using a stapler on that. Where this can become problematic is on thin cardboard type material, where you might want to use a little bit more of a conventional staple profile, like the I think it's the T11 staples. These are a little bit more of a carpentry staple than the type of thing I would use, let's say, on the back of IKEA furniture, where you have those cardboard backs. This is going to be a little bit heavy for that. You don't want to use this for paper and cardboard. You pretty much got to use it for wood or plastic or a little bit heavier material, 1/4 inch material. Again, you can go up to the 3/8 inch material, but that you know, it takes a little a little more going on. This is 5/8, I believe, material, and you can see that it's actually going right in, but the shaft of that staple may be something where you feel that's not sufficient holding strength for something going down the road. As far as sufficient holding strength for something which would, you know, be still and not go anywhere, for example, these areas where I already fastened them using the 18 gauge nailer, well, the stapler can go right in and hold everything. You know, it's just that the nailer can take a longer fastener than the stapler can. This only goes out to 1.5 inches, but if your fastened area only requires 1.5 inches, it's going to be just fine. So if you're building stuff out of this 1x2 nominal material, which is actually more like 3/4 of an inch by 1.5 inch type stuff, you can make it with a stapler just fine, including attaching your flats, your flat panel stuff to that. You can do it with a stapler just fine. So if you're trying to make lightweight furniture or lightweight interior stuff on an RV type thing like this project, it's really good. So there it is, the Ryobi P360 18 gauge stapler.